Hello, everybody. It is maybe just me right now. Nope, it looks like the others are joining. So this is going to be our Q&A session for the next 15 minutes. So if you have any questions about what we've talked about today, which I believe was just talking a little bit about the philosophy behind domain and spun zone, how the systems work together, the three systems individually, and sort of experiences as admins, please feel free to toss them in the Discord chat because that's what this whole time is for you. Whatever we haven't covered that you wish we had.
While we're waiting I know there's a little bit of delay, so I liked Audrey's question around just resources beyond. Mm-hmm. And I really loved hearing and Annika, refer to I watching YouTube videos. I use, the cPanel, basically their official documentation, WordPress beginner. That's one of the things about just myself, my own education with domains, which putting together resources, writing blog posts, making links to these are my cheat sheets. Here are the codes I'll use, or here's the sites I found. It is unbelievably valuable.
It's been fun to work with the support team so closely in the last couple of months, because when we get questions that come into our support queue, we're Googling, we are looking at those resources. And I work regularly with the support team to say, okay, if you've got a personal cheat sheet or a handy list that you're referencing, make that available so other people can see it, even if it, for the internal team, or is there anything here that we can put into a public resource for folks, something that we're referencing. But yeah, it's always interesting, that relationship.
For sure. So one question I wanted to mention that I have written down that I saw earlier in the day was, that might be a good time to do it right now, is talking about transferring cPanels between users. And I think that's a not too difficult one to do, but it's a good thing to know is possible.
Do you want to demonstrate that, Taylor?
Sure.
It's actually luckily, it's pretty straightforward in WHM-CS.
Yeah. So basically,
one of the three tools we showed you today, now it's in practice.
Yeah, I'm right now I'm just getting logged into things here.
Take your time, because while you were doing that, one of the things I wanted to say was, when we're talking about, resources, one of the things, it took me a while, it took me longer than it probably should have, is copying an error code. When you see the error, the first instinct is always freak out, right? But once you have seen it a million times, I finally was wait, maybe I should copy it and search it. And then you'll find yourself on Stack Exchange or something like that with someone oh, it's a bad plugin. Deactivate the plugin.
Are you talking about the HTTP 500
errors? Or any of those, right? If you're looking for guides, one of the things is copy and search the error message you're getting. 9 times out of 10, if it's WordPress, it's a plugin or theme that went wrong or an update that caused it. Some of those seem scarier when you see the error, and we'll talk about this later today. But in fact, a lot of that stuff, if you do the search and you walk backwards from it, you can actually figure out a fair amount of it, which is kind of empowering as a domains admin, because that's part of your superpower to keep it all going, is to say, oh, there's an error, I can help you with that. And then you feel great and they feel great, and everyone's happy.
One of the my particular few gripes with WordPress is that they have a particular error message that's basically something has gone horribly wrong. Bye. That's it. And that's one of the ones in particular.
It's the worst with that. You have to actually go in and enable error messaging. Otherwise, it just breaks.
And it's error messaging. It puts them on the web page, so you can't leave it either.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just dumping them to the page instead of a log file, which is barbaric, I think.
That's one of the ones where deactivating the plugin or theme is often. You check the error log in File Manager. It's right there, and you just say, all right, well, turn that off, and then the error goes away.
Yeah, and that's something that in the common troubleshooting tips section, I will kind of show that a little bit. of what that looks like. We've also got documentation for that linked in that session as well. So that'll be really good. But all right, I have my windows in order here for showing moving the basically WHMCS. If you want to take a cPanel and give it to somebody else, you can just use the move product or service function in WHMCS to do that. Here I'm using SNC's domain of one's own as an example. There's this account owned by an individual, Taylor Jaden.
Suspect.
Yeah. And I actually got an email from I'm assuming Annika set it up of that this account is going away. So, but maybe they need to move it before then, right? So you would go into WHMCS, you'd log in, and you could move the product or service out to a different user. So that it's important to note that in this case, you need to have the other person needs to have logged in to domain of one's own so that that they exist as a client in WHMCS. But once that's happened, they don't even have to have any products or cPanels yet. You can just go to the one you want to move, use move product or service, and it'll open up a window. And then you can either search for them.
We can't see that window.
I can see it. Just
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
You'll either search for them using the search box here, or if you know their client ID, because maybe you have it open on another tab, you can just put that in there and transfer. And it's pretty straightforward if you just need to move it to a new person.
Mhm.
I will also mention that there's a document called cPanel Management that talks about some like similar things, but not exactly the same things. But these are all kind of adjacent, I feel like,
The one at
situations
the
where
bottom.
you've got one cPanel managed by multiple people, or you want to do multiple cPanels managed by one person, right? The opposite of that. So that's a good document in there too. I'm not going to demo that, but
I would
it's good
share
to
that.
know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
can put
that's a
that in the
great
chat.
point because cPanel doesn't natively allow you to have multiple admins. And so we have a couple workarounds that we can use, you know, with in working with WHMCS, we're able to do that. So it looks like Taylor just listed the doc there, but that's a great.
It is. And I'll
Taylor-
tell you another point on that. I'm sorry. Am I interrupting you, Pilot?
I was going to say very quickly, while you're still in WHMCS, if you could, Corinne asked earlier, I believe, about changing packages for users after the fact, which is something that you can do in WHMCS, and we recommend. I don't know if SNC actually has multiple packages, but we can show you where you would go to do that.
Yeah. Hold on. I'll throw my screen back up.
Mhm.
All right.
And so I think that would just be, correct me if I'm wrong, going to right at the top, it's order and then product service. Oh, change package.
Change
Mhm.
package.
Change package.
And keep in mind, WHMCS, we talked about this earlier, depending on the version you have, things may not be exactly where you're seeing these here. This is a bit older version. So there may be some search and, access there, but WHMCS also has documentation with a lot of that stuff documented. But yeah, you would change it right there.
I will mention that SNC does not have multiple packages. And one valid thing that I would add to the last session is I should have done multiple packages. We didn't have a lot of people needing more storage. I could probably count on one hand the amount of people I ever had to increase it for, but still it's good to do that right from the start.
And I will say with new domain setups, that is something that we encourage earlier on now in that onboarding process with new domain schools.
Yeah.
And I think it's taken us a couple of years to realize how helpful those can be. And if you can set those policies and be thinking about how you want to architect each of those cPanels before you have a lot of users, you just have those policies from ground zero, as opposed to saying like, okay, we have 2-3 years of domains under our belt. We have all of these outliers. How are we going to kind of
bring them in the fold?
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think it can be difficult sometimes when you're starting out, it might feel a little bit overwhelming to say, oh, well, how do we account for multiple use cases? And I think that that's a really good point to reach out to other institutions, and that's something that I wish I'd done, because when I started at Carleton, part of what we were trying to figure out is how do we account for different use cases even among faculty. So we have the studio art faculty, we have the history department. Just talking to other schools and to Reclaim, who can maybe help you get in contact with those other schools about what use cases they find to be common and what the purpose of domains at their school and how those two things connect.
I do think that Annika really did a nice job of saying, like, you know, sometimes it's a bit manual work, but you can go through the sites and see what people are doing and spend a little of that time. And it gives you insight that, you know, maybe is not going to just be, you know, immediately apparent from what is essentially a black box of cPanel, right? Sometimes, whether it's going through Installtron with all the installed apps or going through sites, you get a better insight. And it is time, and not time we always have. But I do think her pointing to its value for her to get a sense of what's going on around SNC and Knights domains was, you know, worth it. I used to do a lot of the same thing with UNW domains. Like, I would labor over it. I would look at everything, and then I would write about how great it was. I mean, it was kind of a simple process of, you know, read and promote to get a sense of what's happening and get people excited about it.
One thing that I've been kind of working on since I was an admin at SNC, and I kind of picked up a little bit more recently again, that I'll talk more about tomorrow in the site archiving section, is using just screenshots to get a good overview of what's happening. So I'll share it tomorrow, but I have a script that you can basically just give URLs and it will just go get screenshots.
That's great.
And doing that for Domain of One's Own. And I'm hoping one of the things I want to do is package that up in a way that any admin can use it pretty easily. Basically, you just put URLs in a text file and it gives you a folder of screenshots. And I did that at SNC a couple times, and it was amazing. Just like downloading that folder and looking at it on my Mac, like in the thumbnail view, and just being like, whoa, I've never even seen that. Like, you'd be surprised just on a visual overview what kind of cool stuff you can find out. So that's a tool that I'll talk about tomorrow that anyone can use if they have some expertise at the command line, but I'm hoping to make a little bit more accessible soon.
And I think tomorrow we're going to wrap up here, but I think tomorrow one of the other things we'll talk about is aspirational uses and, you know, very kind of, you know, practical uses of domains for establishing some of that stuff with Tom Woodward and Taylor, which I think does return to a lot of
We
these
have a question in the
topics
chat.
of actually bringing that back in. I'm sorry?
We have a question in the chat
Ooh.
Ed
from
wants to know
Ed
about PHP.
around PHP and removing old PHP versions. I think this will go a little bit into break, but that's fine by me. Ed says 7.2 is still installed on his system, which is out of support and security. So I'm assuming this would be
Yeah, I was actually talking about PHP versions with infrastructure team this past week, and it is on our roadmap to address that by end of year. So we are tracking on that. Our team is actually going to meet as a full, you know, all hands meeting. We've got one scheduled for June just to talk about end of year goals and timelines for those sorts of things. So I don't have official timelines for you now, but we should be pushing that out by the June or July email.
Yeah, what you should know too is
Newsletter.
that the way PHP works in a situation like this is, unless you specifically tell it to use an old version of PHP, there are multiple versions installed, and it's going to inherit by default the default version on the server, which we should have set to a newer version than that. I think 7.4 is what we're doing.
So we'll make
places.
two changes. We'll be getting rid of 7.2 at some point, and then the inherited version will be increased.
Yeah.
And we're also going to be making sure that the latest version is available, because I think there's a newer version out that we want to make sure is.
I think we're pushing to 8.0.
Yeah,
I think that's
what
we're
we're
looking
8.0
at.
is out right now. I'm not sure if we'll be
it
moving
is.
to that as the default.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
it's on our
tricky because
servers
that
right now. I've
will,
seen it.
anytime you
changes.
move the defaults, it will break some older
will.
sites. It just
Yeah.
will. And you can always go back in and say, nope, this one needs an older version.
Yeah,
But it's just a reality of moving PHP versions.
got to be
I
delicate.
think 8.0 is on some servers of ours already.
Yeah.
Ed mentioned 8.1 is out, and that I don't think we have out anywhere on
No.
our servers yet.
We don't. 8 we do.
So at this point, it probably would be good to close this session, take a 5-minute break, and we will see you back for the next session here soon.
Common troubleshooting tips
Yes.
with just as Taylor was talking about earlier.
Awesome.
See you
Thanks
soon.
all.
See y'all soon.